Good morning. So whether you know the story and all the details, maybe you know everything and it's been since you were a little kid at Sunday school and you've heard every single detail about the Easter story. Or maybe it's just a far off distant memory. Like you're not really sure. Like I know like the stone, I know the cross. I kind of got that, but I'm not sure beyond that. No matter where you find yourself in this story, it's okay. Because this story matters. What happened matters. And quite frankly, it's really undeniable that something happened. 2,000 years ago, something happened that changed the course of history. Now, we can debate what that thing was, but that thing that happened changed everything. And so wherever you find yourself in this story, realize that this story didn't just fall out in the middle of nowhere. It came at a perfect time in history. It's a story steeped in tradition. And maybe you have your own family traditions, maybe things you'll do today. Maybe this service is part of that family tradition. You go to a Sunday service and you get to listen to somebody blabber on for a little bit, right? But maybe you'll do what my family does, and we'll go eat a big meal, and then we'll have the Easter egg hunt. And my family does like an egg toss, and you try to sneak the hard-boiled egg in and hope no one finds out. And then they inevitably find out. It's part of the reason I started wearing a silicone ring. It was just on Easter, so it didn't crack. It's strategic play. But the best part about my family's Easter egg tradition, or Easter tradition, is that after we've done the egg toss, after the little kids go and they get to hunt their eggs, we have an adult Easter egg hunt, okay? Now, this is for cash prizes, folks, all right? So parents, grandparents in here, take note. Like, if you want your adult kids to come back for holidays, you give them money, all right? And this becomes like cutthroat the day of. Like we are all out going for one single egg that is stuffed full gift cards, cash. Like I won $50. Actually, my wife won $50. I found the egg. She won $50. So I'm told, all right? But this is just, we are gonna go out, like there's yelling at each other, there's name calling in love, right? We are going at it until that egg is found. And once that egg is found, no one's wrestling that. It is sacred. And then we forget exactly who found it. We were texting each other in group, like, who found it last year? Like, I don't remember. I'm like, it was me. So I'm just claiming it right now, reigning champ. And we'll see. Check in next week and we'll let you know, all right? But this is part of that tradition. And tradition tells us a story. Traditions tell your family story of what matters to your family. And so this story from 2,000 years ago has been passed down. Now, it's not just the what that happened that's so important, it's the when that happened, that everything from religion to politics to the socioeconomic issues all came to this one moment. Imagine a storm just converging in one moment in time, in one moment in history, and it all comes down to this moment. The what happened. That this week wasn't just an ordinary week. This week in Israel was the Passover week. And the Passover was a festival that they would celebrate, a week-long festival to remember coming out of slavery. For 400 years, the Israelites spent in Egypt in slavery, that they were captives. And maybe you'll remember like Charlton Heston and big arms and let my people go, right? That's what we're talking about. That's where this comes from. And so in that, they're remembering that God freed them from slavery. And so God sends all these plagues on the Egyptians and the Israelites alike to try to convince Pharaoh to let my people go. And finally, the last plague was to take the life of the firstborn. And the only way that you could be spared from this punishment, from this plague, was to kill a spotless, perfect lamb, to take the blood and put it over the doorpost of your house. And if you did that, God's judgment would pass over your household. And so when they celebrate Passover, this is what they're remembering. They're remembering God passing his judgment over them to save them and to redeem them. This is a big deal. And so Jerusalem was not a very large town in the first century. It's about 25,000 people. 25,000 people. And the top of Jerusalem, the old city, was only about 1 square mile. And then it would sprawl out from there. So 25,000 people just in a couple square miles would swell in this week of the Passover week that some historians think to over 1 million people. Can you imagine? Right? Like, I don't even like when they're putting in the crosswalks up in town. Right? I'm like, I got to go where to get around that? But it swells to this point. And so imagine trying just to go about your daily business and running into people and you can't move and this happens. Pastor Jeremy and I, just last month, had the opportunity to go down to opening day. You ever been to opening day? And you go down there. I'm like 40 years old and I've never been to opening day. It took me that long to go. Crazy, right? And so go down, we see the parade, and I'm not like a big fan of crowds. Some bad things happen in crowds, and I've been a part of that, right? Like, I'm just like, But we go down, and we're like, man, we're really hungry after the parade. So we go into a restaurant, and they're like, yeah, they took our name and number, and they're like, we'll text you when it's ready. There's 91 parties in front of you. 91? Okay, all right. So we walk out and we decide to walk towards the stadium and there's just a sea of people and you're trying to get through and you're just bumping and people are walking and you're like done even apologizing. You're just like, all right, I'm getting there. So finally we get down to the end and there's a taco stand there and we're like, oh, tacos. Okay, finally we can get some food. So we wait in line and we're getting there. I'm like this far to the counter and still have people passing in front of me. I'm like, okay, you're trying to yell and you're like, hey, do you have any tacos? And the lady behind the counter goes, she opens up the little hot box and she goes, I've got soy chorizo. And I'm like, I look at Jeremy and he's behind me. He goes, chorizo? Yeah, that's fine. I'm like, all right, fine. We'll take some chorizo, soy chorizo meat substitution. And so we manage our way out. We're sitting down and we start eating them. I'm like, man, these are pretty good for soy. And he went, for what? I said, soy chorizo. He's like, I only heard chorizo. What do you mean soy chorizo? You didn't help me and stop me and say, no, we're not interested in that? I'm like, dude, we were really hungry. He's like, but in this time, right, when crowds are pushing in and things are happening, we have this propensity to misinterpret what happens and what's going on. And so you take the what happened, the when it happened, and now take the history of Israel. For 1,000 years, they have been promised that a coming king would come and relieve them from oppression and would establish and make Israel great. That's what they were waiting for. In the line of David, this amazing king, you remember like David and Goliath, right? The boy shepherd and the sling, and he takes out a giant. Yeah, he eventually became king. He was a warrior king. And now this Messiah would come. He'd be given all the power, all the authority of God, and all of that would rest on him, and he would kick out the Romans, hopefully. You see, Israel during this time had an occupying force living in their country. They had their holy temple up on this top of the mount in Jerusalem. And what did the Romans do? They built a tower right next to the temple so they could just look in and see what was going on. How invasive is that, right? Would we like, our government just to build a tower out here? Like cool, thanks, we're just trying to see what's going on. Make sure nothing's happening. We're like, oh, okay. But this is what's happening, that they're waiting for a coming Messiah, a warrior king that would kick the Romans' butts. That's what they're waiting for. And for 3.5 years, rumors have been swirling around in the hillside that there is a teacher, a rabbi, and he's doing these really crazy things. Did you hear that he fed 5,000 people from one lunch? Did you hear that guy that was blind? He sees. That guy who couldn't hear, he was deaf, he's now hearing. Did you see that? Did you hear that? That guy who couldn't walk, he's walking, he's running around, look at him. Could this be it? Could this be the one, the king we've been waiting for? And then this rabbi, this teacher, Jesus, his inner circle, starts looking at him. And Jesus starts acting weird in these final weeks. He starts saying weird things and doing things. Like he got mad at like a fig tree and like cursed it. And they're like, that was weird. What was that about? Right? He starts saying things that, he's going to destroy the temple and rebuild it. Well, that's weird. I don't understand. I don't see what's going on. And so then on the Sunday, the beginning of the week, the people in the crowd swelling, he tells two of his disciples, he says, hey, go into the next village before we go into Jerusalem, go into the next village, and there you're going to find a young donkey, a colt that's never been ridden before. And I want you to untie it, and I want you to bring him to me. And if anybody stops you, if anybody asks what you're doing, just tell them the Lord needs it. Like, imagine being those disciples, like, what? Like, Jesus told them to just go steal a Civic, right? Go into Hillsborough, and the first car you see, just take it. And if somebody asks what you're doing, just say, the Lord needs it. Okay, right? And sure enough, they go into the next town, they find the colt, they untie it, and somebody's like, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, the Lord needs it? Okay. Right? Like, what else does this work on? But they take this, they bring it back to Jesus, and they take off their cloaks, and they put it on the donkey, and Jesus gets on the donkey, and then they walk through the eastern gate into Jerusalem, and somebody sees Jesus, sees him in the distance, and goes, could it be the king? And the people come, and they start yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna! Which means save us now, save us from the Romans, save us from our problems, save us now. And then somebody else yells out, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, in his power. He's coming in power. Blessed is he who comes in the line of David. Oh, that did it. And Jesus is riding in on this donkey, and they take their cloaks off and they lay it on the ground. He walks and they grab palm trees and they cut these off. These palms were a national symbol that this is Israel. This is who we are. Hosanna, Hosanna, save us now. And then Jesus walks into the temple, and it's late in the day. He looks around and he goes, all right, let's go home. Imagine being his disciples. Like, this is it. Let's go. We're going where? I thought this was the time you establish your kingdom. Let's make it happen. Let's do it now. Even they're misunderstanding what's going on. And so this is where our story brings us. So if you have your Bibles, would you open with me to Mark chapter 11? Mark chapter 11. Hey, I just want to thank you for being here. If we haven't met, I'm Robbie. I'm a senior pastor here. We're just so excited for what we're doing, what God is doing through us in this town, and our hope that we bring healing to broken places. That's our goal. That's what we want to do, and we think Jesus is the ultimate answer for that. And so, hey, if you find Mark, it's in the New Testament, you're going to find guys' names, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. You're looking for Mark. Mark chapter 11, the chapters are the big verses, or the big numbers, the verses are the small numbers, all right? Things they don't tell you, and you're just like, I have no idea where I am, all right? If you got a digital Bible, that's pretty easy. So years ago, my friend and pastor, Chris Brown, our sending church from North Coast Church, actually preached a message called The Four Crowds at Easter. And with his permission, I said, hey, can I take that outline and like rework it and just kind of build on it? He's like, yeah, go for it. And I'm like, I'm going to steal it. And he's like, you can't steal what's been given. I'm like, all right, yeah. And so with this, I want to talk about the four crowds or four responses we see to Jesus at Easter. And maybe you're in crowd number one. Let's read that in Mark chapter 11. And I'm just going to read the first 11 verses. It's going to be on the screen as well. Mark writes, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you doing this? Say, the Lord needs it, and he will send it back here shortly. They went and found a colt outside the street, tied to a doorway, and they untied it. And some people standing there asked, what are you doing, untying that colt? And they answered as Jesus had told them to, and the people let them go. And when they brought the colt to Jesus, they threw their cloaks over it, and he sat on it. And many people spread their cloaks on the road, while those spread branches they had cut in the fields. Those who went ahead and those who followed shouted, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple court. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. And so we're going to see this crowd here. This crowd, if you're following along and filling in the blanks, is what can Jesus do for me? What can Jesus do for me? Jesus, I want all the benefits that you give me, but I don't want any of the sacrifice. right? I want you to go kick Roman butt, deal with my problems, but other than that, I don't know, what have you done for me? What can you do for me? Flip over to Mark chapter 15. Mark chapter 15, starting in verse 6. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. And the crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews? Pilate asked. Crucify him, they shouted. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. And he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. They moved from Hosanna to crucify. Now these probably aren't the same people that are yelling Hosanna and that they go and yell crucified. But this is the crowd. And it's because, Jesus, what have you done for me? To, what have you done for me lately? Jesus, what have you done for me lately? Why? Why should I follow you? Release Barabbas. At least Barabbas is killing my problems. Like, he's dealing with my problems. He's killing Romans, right? That's gonna solve my issue. Jesus, I'm not sure what he's done for me. You see, a faith built on convenience crumbles when life gets hard. Convenient faith crumbles at the first sign of adversity. At the first sign of adversity. Now, look at Mark chapter 12. 12:12. Then the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders looked for a way to arrest him because they knew he had spoken the parable against them. So Jesus is talking and he's teaching, and then he says some pretty scandalous, nasty things about the religious leaders. And they're sitting there going, I don't like that, right? But they were afraid of the crowd, so they left him and went away. So they start scheming and start figuring out what they can do to take care of Jesus, to take care of their problem, the guy who impacted their power and their control. And that's where you might find yourself in this second crowd, this crowd that says, I know better than God. I'm smarter than God. It's a crowd that redefines Jesus how they want him to be rather than how he truly is. That I really want Jesus to just be nice and to co-sign whatever I decide I want to do with my life. I'm a good person. Jesus would like me. That might be. Jesus loves you, right? But he wants to change you. The God made in your image can't save you. A God made in your image can't save you. And so you may sit here and go, why would I read the Bible? Why does it matter? Isn't it antiquated? Isn't it outdated? What does it matter? It doesn't impact my life at all. I got bills to pay, kids to feed. I got to get them to school, go to work, go to practice. I got all these things I got to do. What difference does Jesus make? I'll just figure it on my own. And in that moment, say, I know better than God. I'm going to figure this out on my own. But for many of us, Jesus isn't even that personal. He's more of this seasonal guest, like Christmas and Easter, maybe a wedding here or there when you hear a verse and you're like, oh yes, Jesus, right? And there's no verses for this next crowd, but we know they were there. It's a crowd that says, that was a nice message, I'll see you next year. Why? How do we know they were there? Well, there's 1 million people in the city, and they all left. They left. The events of that week did nothing, did change nothing. It didn't impact them at all. They just decided to peace out. See, holiday faith won't carry you through everyday life. Holiday faith won't carry you through everyday life. But maybe there's one last response. A response that looks at Jesus and it looks at the events of Easter and it looks at the cross, it looks at the resurrection of an empty tomb and it says, Jesus, I'm all in. Jesus, I'm all in. Turn with me to Luke. Go to your right. Matthew, Mark, Luke, at the very end, chapter 24. starting in verse 50. So Jesus has been resurrected, he's appearing to people, and now he's about to ascend up into heaven. And so it says in verse 50, when he had led them out of the vicinity of Bethany, he lifted up his hands and blessed them. And while he was blessing them, he left them and was taken up into heaven. And then they worshiped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. And they stayed continually at the temple, praising God. When we see who Jesus really is, and we say, Jesus, I'm all in, our surrender leads to worship. Our surrender leads to worship, because resurrection leads to transformation. Resurrection leads to transformation. It's not just an addition to your life, but a new center for your life. And so we see these different crowds. We see the crowd that says, Jesus, what have you done for me? What have you done for me lately? We see a crowd that says, I'm smarter than God. I know better. We see a crowd that just says, hey, that's a nice message, but I'll see you next year. I'm just here to make people happy. And finally, we see a crowd that says, Jesus, I'm all in. You see, the central claim of Christianity is that Jesus was crucified, died, was buried. 3 days later, he was resurrected. This is what Easter is all about. And now we, as Christians, say that his death makes us right with God, that he paid the full price for our sins, and that we received his righteousness. It's a big word for rightness. That we received the rightness of God. And his resurrection conquers death, and now we have a hope in a better world where Jesus is king. You see, the resurrection demands a response. Because here's the thing, if Jesus didn't die, then none of these responses, none of these crowds really matter. Choose whichever one makes you feel good, right? Whichever one makes you feel best, choose that. Take the holiday Jesus, that's cool. Take the motivational speaker Jesus, that's fine. Take the social justice Jesus that solves all your problems. And then finally take the get out of hell free jail, right? Get out of jail free card, there it is. All right, like whichever one you want, just take it. If he didn't actually rise from the dead, then it doesn't really matter. You can form Jesus just a historical figure as a good guy, good teacher, like he just got arrested and got killed. Tough, that's bad, Take whichever Jesus you want. But if Jesus did really rise from the dead, then he's not just one more religious option. He's not someone you can keep at a distance or add to your life as a supplement. He is Lord, he's King, and everything changes because of the resurrection. You see, the early church didn't go all in with Christmas. We make a really big deal of Christmas. We love Christmas. But Christmas only really became a big deal in the last couple hundred years. Easter has always been the big deal for the church. Easter is where it's at. Easter is what it's about. Because something happened. And the early church didn't just go all in on the cross. Because if Jesus had just died, he was just another dead teacher. How do we know this? Because they walked away from Jesus. Well, he was dead, right? And only the women that Sunday morning deciding like, hey, let's do our duty and go and take some spices. Who's going to roll a stone away? How are we going to handle this? What's going to happen? Only the women show up, right? And they have the faith. And the angel says, go back and tell all the dudes, right? The resurrection changed everything. They watched him die, and then they walked away, and then he appeared to them, and then he ate with them, and then he talked with them, and then he let them touch his scars on his hands, his feet, and his side. So before we go any further, we need to ask, did it really happen? And if so, what does that mean for us? And so let's just go through. I know you have a lot of fill in the blanks, and you're really worried about your time, all right? We're going to get through them, and if we don't, I'll just hard stop, and we'll continue again sometime. Not really, I'll preach for hours, just somebody will have to stop me and pull me off. All right, so number one, resurrection is not just life after death. It's not just life after death. That's actually what most pagan religions taught and still teach, that your soul lives on in some shadowy place like Hades. And so you die, and then you go there, and you have to cross the river Styx and do all that and pay your penance and do that. Historians argue, though, that nowhere in history outside of Judaism, was there a belief in a resurrection. And actually, even with Judaism believed that the resurrection would happen at the end of time. It didn't just happen to one dude in the middle of history. It was unheard of. And now I think we're like, oh, it's Resurrection Sunday, we're here. Like, this is mind-bending that we're saying that our faith is built on a guy that was God in the flesh, goes and is crucified. His death pays a debt for you to be right with God, and then he was buried in a tomb and only spent 3 days in it, and then comes back to life in a resurrection, and now he's worthy of worship. If that's not true, we're nuts. That's insane. Sit in that for a moment, church. This is what we're claiming. And then we go, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, but it hasn't changed your life? What? The resurrection changes everything. In fact, Christianity is often accused, and maybe you've heard it, and maybe even spouted this off, that Christianity actually borrowed its myth about Jesus resurrecting from Greek and Persian myths, like Mithra, and that he was resurrected. And the funny thing is, though, in culture, in writing, that Mithra coming back to life only happened maybe at 200 AD, 300 AD. So Persian myth actually had to come in contact with a real risen Jesus in order to be resurrected. Isn't that interesting? So it's not just life after death. It's not revivification like Lazarus. Jesus didn't just come back to life like someone who flatlined and they got resuscitated. Everyone who has ever died and then been resurrected, like a Lazarus, has died again. How do we know? Because you cannot go over to Israel and go sit down with Lazarus and have a meal. He died again. All right? Jesus' resurrection is different. It's not a revivification. Jesus rose to life, never to die again. And number 3, it's not reincarnation or purgatory. Reincarnation is this belief that your soul, as an infinite thing, jumps from body to body over time in this self-purification cycle until you are right with the universe. Purgatory is the belief that when you die, you go to a holding place for purification. And maybe some of you were taught this, and that you would go in this holding place and that you can make it right over time, and your friends and family and loved ones can pray for you and hope for the best for you. And that's purgatory. This is not what we're talking about when we talk about resurrection. It's not spiritual rehab, and it's not a cosmic spin cycle. The resurrection is not about working your way up to God. It's about Jesus pulling you out of the grave and making you completely new. So what is the resurrection? This is really important. If we're going to claim that the resurrection is true, what is it? The resurrection is a renewal of the physical body. A renewal of the physical body. We're not Greek philosophers. Greek philosophy teaches a dualism, that there's the soul and the flesh, and that the flesh, the body, is bad, and the soul has to be removed from that. And so actually death is a welcomed thing because you can leave this carnal life behind. All right? That is a false belief. That is not a biblical belief. The belief is a renewal of the physical body, that our hope comes from knowledge that our soul and our body will one day be joined together, perfected and whole and eternal. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 5:8 that we are confident, and I say, I would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So there is a separation. The resurrection brings it back and renews it. So think about it like this, that your current body is like a rough draft, that the resurrection is the final perfected version. Same author, same material, but completely rewritten by grace. And the resurrection is not about a disembodied soul drifting off somewhere. It's about a renewed body here in God's restored kingdom. One of my favorite theologians, N.T. Wright, calls it life after death. So, your second point, that resurrection is life after a period of being dead. It's not a metaphor. It's not a near-death experience. That Jesus was dead. He was buried. He spent 3 days in a tomb and then alive. So you're dead, then resurrection. Then you're alive again. So it's life after death. And it's a complete reversal of death. It's a complete reversal of death. The resurrection isn't poetic language, a description of death and going off to heaven. It's a declaration that death has been defeated. It's not a soft ending, it's a new beginning. Jesus didn't just redefine death, he overcame death. So the resurrection is central. It's not just a symbol, it's the foundation for our hope. So we have to ask, can we trust it? Is there any reason to really believe that a resurrection happened 2,000 years ago in the city of Jerusalem? Or is it just wishful thinking dressed up in its Sunday best? Because even though we're so enlightened now, like back then when people died, they tended just to stay dead. That wasn't normal. We haven't like arrived now. We're like, oh, resurrection, that doesn't happen anymore, right? Like it didn't happen then either. And I want you to understand that. Christianity isn't built on blind faith. It's built on evidence and history and eyewitness accounts. It's built on fulfilled prophecy. And the resurrection invites us into faith, but not without reason. And so I want us to think logically about this. And I have 5 compelling reasons that you can trust the resurrection. Number 1, it was predicted and recorded. Okay, I have 6 compelling reasons to trust the resurrection happened. It was predicted and then it was recorded. Some of you will get that later. It was predicted first by the prophets. Isaiah 53 talked about a suffering servant, and that one would come and he would be killed and that he would find new life again. That he'd be beaten and die and he'd find new life again. This is Isaiah 53, and I have the verses there for you, and you can go home and look these up and look at it. It was predicted by Jesus himself. He told his disciples repeatedly that he'd rise on the 3rd day. Mark, which we started out reading, the Gospel of Mark tells Peter's story. It's the Gospel according to Mark, but really it's Peter's story that he writes down. And Mark writes his story probably AD 50 or so, like 20 years after Jesus dies, it's being written down. Do you realize like Alexander the Great, the biographies that we have about him were written 400 years after he died? Yet we take those as fact. We don't question those. No one's like, oh, I don't believe Alexander the Great existed, right? Oh, okay. Like Jesus did exist. And what we're claiming as Christians is that something happened. And we're saying in the lifetime of people that would have been eyewitness to it, it was being toted around as actually happening. And I don't know about you, if you were there and everybody started acting like this dead body in front of you, it's alive. Like you'd be like, everybody's nuts, get out, right? Like you'd be telling people like, they're nuts, that didn't happen, right? You'd be correcting the story because it sounds so crazy. You'd be telling people that is not what happened. And then we see Paul. Paul is very shortly after Jesus' resurrection, Paul comes to faith. He was Saul. He was an ardent persecutor of the church. He was actually murdering Christians, arresting them, putting them on trial. And Jesus appears to him on the road to Damascus going into Syria. And he has a life-changing experience. And then he spends the rest of his life now traveling in missionary journeys, establishing churches, and then writing letters because those churches are really jacked up. All right? So he's just like fixing theology all the time. In 1 Corinthians 15, he has this giant treatise on resurrection. And 1 Corinthians most likely was written around AD 50. It was written 20 years after the resurrection. And what he says in here, in verse 3, it says, what I received, I passed on to you. He received teaching about the resurrection, and now he's passing it on to the church at Corinth. This is what happened. This is real. That's what Paul is saying. So next, Jesus really died. Some have theorized that Jesus, it's what's called the swoon theory, that Jesus just passed out, right? And he actually wasn't really dead. He just passed out. And then he spent 3 days in the tomb and then got up and rolled the stone back. And now let's think logically about this. Jesus was arrested on a Thursday night with no sleep. He was then put on a mock trial. He was then beaten, slapped, pretty much tortured, stripped naked, and then carried his crossbeam from the prison all the way up to the hill. He was laid down on that. Then they would take nails and drive them in his hands and feet, and then he hung there until he couldn't breathe as he's doing that. And then they take a spear to check that he's dead and shove it up through down here into his heart, and his heart sac is punctured. Water and blood flow out. And then they take him down off the cross. They wrap him in 100 pounds of linen burial cloth and spices, lay him in a tomb, and because they're afraid that the body's going to get stolen, they take a giant stone, roll it in front of it, and then put Roman guards out front. And so now we're saying, well, Jesus didn't actually die, he passed out. So he had no food, no water, no medical care for 3 days. Like I go to the gym one day and I'm like, I'm gonna die, right? Like I'm not hand-to-hand combating soldiers, rolling a stone back, taking off the linens, and if I do get that, I don't even make my bed in the morning. I'm not rising back and taking the linens off and folding them nice and neat, right? He didn't just swoon, he didn't just pass out, he was dead. Jesus really died. And in fact, the Romans were very good at killing. That's a pretty big mistake to be like, this guy's a prisoner, this guy's a criminal, we're going to crucify him, and we're like, I think he's dead, let's just take him down. No, you finished the job, you made sure. Because if not, you might be the next one. So, we have to think about this, that Jesus actually died. He wasn't just stuck in the tomb trying to figure out how to get his way out. As a young family, my wife and I were trying to figure out how we were going to talk about the resurrection, what traditions we were going to do, things we were going to do. And my wife bought this is going to sound crazy, at least I thought it was, a toy tomb off of Etsy. I brought it. And this is the cutest, most ridiculous thing ever. All right. It also shakes like this, and our house floors are old, and it goes like this when you walk past it. And I'm like, not yet, Jesus, But the kids got it, and they're looking at it, and they're playing with it, and I'm in the next room, and I'm like, oh, isn't that cute? They're just playing with that, and they open it up, and Jesus is inside. Look at that, and it's here, and my littlest one goes, he's stuck. And the middle child, who will remain nameless, middle boy, he looked at it, and he confidently corrected her. He's like, he's not stuck, he's blocked. And in this moment, Jesus is neither stuck nor blocked. I'm like, that's the pastor's kids. I'm like, I have failed them, right? You ever had that moment with your kids? You're in the next room, you thought it was so sweet, and they're like, oh, that took a dark turn, right? That was heresy. But in this moment, he's not stuck, he's not blocked, he is dead. And then on top of that, the tomb is empty. The tomb is empty. Jesus was buried in a well-known location. He was given the tomb of a rich man named Joseph of Arimathea. And then Jesus used it for 3 days. 3 days he rented it like a prom tuxedo and gave it back, right? It was a well-known location. And then a body was never produced. You don't think that if disciples, these fishermen, these Galilean, honestly, they were Hicks, right? Northern Israel was basically our south, right? And so these guys are coming around Jesus came back to life, right? We're not grab a body, anybody, just take it through the street and be like, no, he's not back to life. Look, and no one ever did that. They're not taking a body going, here's Jesus, they're stupid, right? Don't listen to them. No one ever produces a body. And even his enemies admitted that the tomb was empty. They couldn't explain it, and they tried to cover it up. Hey, just say, you fell asleep. What? Roman guards don't fall asleep. You can't do that while you're on guard. Just say you fall asleep, and they took it. And he was seen by many, individuals and small groups. And at one time, Paul tells us that Jesus appeared to over 500 people at one time. He ate, and he spoke, and he let people touch his wounds. This isn't I felt it in my heart that Jesus was alive and I just knew it. This is he sat at my table and ate my fish, bro. Something happened. And then finally, lives were changed. Let's talk about his family. James and Jude were his brother. James becomes a leader of the church in Jerusalem and then pens a letter by his name. We weren't very creative back then with book titles, right? And then Jude's also his brother. He writes a small letter as well, both included in the New Testament. And they worship Jesus. I have sisters. I do not know what it would take for me to worship one of them as God. What would it take for you to worship one of your siblings? You can look up to your left and your right. I know they're here. Or you'd be like, oh, never. I know what you did, Something radically happened that James and Jude both are now worshiping Jesus, their brother, including Mary's sticking around to the end. She's a central figure in the early church. And now, like, I'm sure your mom loves you, but your mom's not worshiping you, right? And if she is, that's like, we look at that, because you all know there's one on your ball team that you're like, oh, that's an unhealthy relationship. That kid's going to be in therapy someday, right? Like, we just know that. But this is not what happens. And she's not just like coddling him, she's worshiping him. And we see his enemies. We already talked about Saul becomes Paul, who moves from persecutor to preacher. And finally, the church seemingly launches overnight in the same city where he was killed. And the disciples, almost all of them, except for John, were martyred. They were murdered for the belief. I don't know about you, how strong does a lie have to be that you hold on to this lie all the way to the grave, even if somebody's threatening you with death? I'd give it up real fast. Like, I have zero pain tolerance. You'd like pull my pinky. I'd be like, I'm out. No. The resurrection happened. So what did the resurrection actually do for us? We are forgiven. The resurrection is proof that the cross worked. We are sanctified. This is a big fancy word that you are, your sin and God's righteousness get transferred. You're sanctified, given time. Over a given time, And the resurrection power is at work in us now. We are justified. God's justice has been satisfied. Romans 4:25 says he was delivered over to death for our sin and was raised to life for our justification. The resurrection stamped the cross approved. We have hope. We have hope. 1 Peter 1:3, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new life into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. So we know that this world is not the end. No more pain, no more fear, no more death ever again. And then we have purpose. We have purpose that the church isn't an escape pod. It's a launching pad to go out into the world and to transform the world, to bring heaven to earth now as the people of God. Paul, at the end of 1 Corinthians 15, that treatise on resurrection, says, therefore, because of the resurrection, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm, let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So our labor in the Lord is not meaningless. Our labor in the Lord is not meaningless. Resurrection means your prayers matter, and your service matters, and your ordinary faithfulness, it all matters, because Jesus didn't just rise to get out of this world, he rose to change it. And now he sends us with power and purpose. The resurrection changes everything. It gives us forgiveness and transformation and confidence and an unshakable hope. It means your past isn't final, and your pain isn't pointless, and your life isn't random. That storm I mentioned at the beginning, the storm converging, they come and they clash, and all of the energy of the storm is put out in a single moment in history. It's put out on the cross. And now it exhausts itself on the cross, that Jesus took it all in that moment on the cross. And now anything that we would look to solve our problems, we've tried to bring peace by war, and we've only ended up with more war. This last century was the bloodiest ever. We have the sexual revolution. There's an epidemic of sexual harassment and assault that has come in the name of freedom. And people are more lonely and confused than ever. Our technology has offered us ease of life and freedom. And we're more connected to the events of the world than we are to the people around us. Money, wealth, we've pursued wealth, but most of us have been crippled by debt and inflation. And finally, religion. We've looked to religion, and religious leaders have hit the headlines time and time again and failed us over and over. We're at a moment in time that we can do anything that we like, but we can't remember why we liked it. The world has failed us, but the resurrection grounds us in the reality of life and hope, and it grounds us in a community of people on your left and your right, that you are not to do this life alone, that you are not alone. Jesus did not fail. He conquered death. Everything the world has to offer will fail. And the resurrection is not just something we agree with, it's something we respond to. Today, church, I want to invite you to say, I'm all in. Jesus, I'm all in. That you look at the events of the resurrection of 2,000 years ago and you say, I see something changed. I don't fully understand. I don't fully get it, but man, I'm all in. I want to know more. I believe that Jesus rose from the dead and I'm staking my whole life on it. So the real question isn't, did Jesus rise? The question is, what are you going to do because he did? And I don't know where you are today. I don't know what brings you here today. Maybe you're just here to make somebody happy. I'm glad you're here. But maybe in this moment, you say, hey, I'm not here for a holiday, Jesus. I need something different. I need to figure out something different. Hey, Jesus, are you it? Is this it? Because I'm all in if it is. Church, that's the decision. That's the response that we have this morning. That's the opportunity that we have to not say, Jesus, come and just make my life better, solve my problems. It's not, Jesus, take care of these issues, but I'll take it from here. It's say, no, Jesus, I need you, and I'll give you everything because you're so worth it. So you can repent. That means fancy word of turning away, turning back. You can believe and you can obey and you can step into resurrection life. And so if this is you this morning, I just want to say a simple prayer that you can repeat just between you and the Lord. And if that's you, I just want to invite you into that prayer. So would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for bringing me here today. I know I've been trying to do life on my own without you. I have sinned and I have fallen short. And Jesus, I need you. Jesus, I want to believe and I want to live in resurrection life. So would you save me and I'll trust in you? Would you guide me and I'll walk with you? For the rest of us that are here, Jesus, we thank you. We thank you for bringing us here and renewing our hope in the resurrection. That the Christian faith is not built on just a baby at Christmas. It's not only built on a cross that takes all of our sin, but it's built on the resurrection, that the resurrection stamps the cross approved. So Jesus, we love you. We pray all these things in your name. Amen.